In the arid and often unforgiving lands of Judah, where rocky hills rose under a vast and harsh sky, there flourished, despite the environment's severity, a singular beauty in the figure of a woman named Abigail. Her loveliness was not merely physical, but radiated from a keen intelligence and a sensible spirit, rare and precious qualities in a time when brute force and impulsiveness often dictated the course of life. She was the wife of Nabal, a man whose wealth in possessions vast, flocks of sheep and goats that grazed the hillsides, was inversely proportional to his character. Nabal, whose very name meant foolish or senseless, embodied these traits in every one of his actions and words, weaving for himself and his household a tapestry of distrust and resentment among those who knew him. Abigail's beauty and wisdom were therefore a solitary beacon amidst the darkness of her husband's nature, a silent promise of discernment in a home marked by imprudence. At that time, David, not yet anointed king over all Israel, led a band of valiant warriors, men forged in hardship and loyal to his command. They roamed the same hills of Judah, often finding shelter in caves and protecting the local communities from raiders and wild animals. On one such occasion, while David and his men were near Nabal's lands, they extended their protection to this wealthy man's shepherds, ensuring that his flocks could graze safely, unmolested. Expecting some acknowledgement for this aid, David sent some of his young messengers to Nabal, requesting a modest contribution of provisions for himself and his men, a common gesture of reciprocity and hospitality in those times. David hoped that the kindness shown in the past would be remembered and repaid, sealing a relationship of mutual respect between himself and the influential landowner. The response that David's messengers brought back echoed with an insolence and an ingratitude that ignited the righteous anger of the future king. Nabal, demonstrating the foolishness that his name foretold, not only refused the reasonable request, but did so with scorn and contempt. He questioned David's legitimacy, referring to him as a runaway servant of his lord Saul, and mocked the idea of sharing his precious provisions with a band of unknown men. His words, laden with arrogance and disdain, revealed a miserly heart and a complete lack of acknowledgement for the protection his property had received. Upon hearing the humiliating report of his messengers, David's patience ran out. The injustice of Nabal's refusal, coupled with his gratuitous insolence, kindled in him an impetuous fury. Immediately, David ordered his men to prepare for battle, vowing that by morning, not a single man belonging to Nabal would be left alive. The shadow of vengeance now hung over the house of the fool, an imminent storm about to break upon those who had scorned kindness and sown offense. However, among Nabal's servants, there was a sensible young man who perceived the gravity of the situation and the imminent catastrophe that his master's foolishness had provoked. Fearing David's retaliation and knowing the relentless nature of his leader when provoked, he hurried to Abigail, the only hope of averting a massacre. With urgent words and a tone of apprehension, the young man recounted the visit of David's messengers, the disrespectful way in which Nabal had treated them, and the vengeful fury that now consumed the future king's heart. He described David and his men as powerful and loyal warriors whose protection had been essential for the safety of Nabal's flocks in the past, and lamented his master's blindness in not recognizing this kindness. The news plunged Abigail into a whirlwind of worry and immediate action. She knew that Nabal's irascible temper and his inability to recognize the consequences of his actions placed her entire household in mortal danger. Without losing an instant, Abigail planned a bold and calculated action. Knowing the generosity that often softened the hearts of men of war, and perceiving the justice in David's initial claim, she decided to intercede personally. Quickly, she ordered her servants to prepare a generous offering of provisions: 200 loaves of bread, 2 skins of wine, 5 dressed sheep, 5 measures of roasted grain, 100 clusters of raisins, and 200 cakes of pressed figs. She loaded everything on donkeys and instructed her servants to go ahead of her without Nabal's knowledge of her initiative. In her heart, Abigail nurtured the hope of finding David before he unleashed his fury, of appealing to his reason and his mercy, and of preventing the innocent bloodshed that would certainly follow the attack. Her beauty was undeniable, but her true strength lay in her wisdom and her courage to act decisively in a moment of crisis, taking upon herself the responsibility of saving her household from the imminent destruction caused by her husband's folly. And so, Abigail set out stealthily, descending the hills to meet David and his furious men, who were already on their way to carry out their vengeance. The dust raised by her steps and the hooves of the donkeys was almost a foreshadowing of the storm she hoped to calm with her intervention. The austere landscape of the region, with its winding paths and imposing rocks, would witness the crucial encounter between a woman's wisdom and a warrior's fury. In Abigail's heart, hope and fear intertwined as she approached the decisive moment, aware that the fate of her household and all who lived in it rested upon the eloquence of her words and the clemency of the man she sought to appease. Each step brought her closer to the meeting that could mean salvation or destruction, a silent testament to the courage of a woman willing to face the wrath of an army to protect her family. And then, in the middle of the winding road that snaked through the hills, Abigail saw David and his 400 men marching towards her, their faces etched with fury and the determination to carry out their vengeance. Without hesitation, Abigail quickly dismounted her donkey and prostrated herself before David, face to the ground, in a gesture of profound humility and respect. The dust of the road covered her garments, but the intensity of her pleading gaze was unmistakable. She recognized in David not only the leader of a band of warriors, but also the Lord's anointed, the future king of Israel, and her posture reflected this perception. In her hands, she carried not only material gifts, but also the offer of reason and peace, seeking to divert the course of violence that her husband's folly had unleashed. The encounter at that isolated point on the road was a clash between wrath and wisdom, between immediate revenge and consideration for future consequences. With a humble voice, yet filled with urgency and sincerity, Abigail began her eloquent speech. She took the blame for her husband's foolishness, imploring David not to pay attention to the words of a senseless man whose very name bore his character. She reminded David of his own divine mission, his future as the anointed king, and warned him not to stain his hands with unnecessary blood, especially the blood of innocents who would surely perish along with Nabal. Abigail appealed to David's justice and mercy, acknowledging his legitimacy and his destiny, and encouraged him to trust that the Lord would avenge him of his enemies in due time, without him needing to resort to impulsive violence. Her words were a flowing river of wisdom, seeking to extinguish the flames of David's anger and sow in his heart the seed of patience and clemency. Abigail continued, presenting the generous offering of provisions as a sign of peace and goodwill, an acknowledgement of the need of David and his men. She humbly asked him to accept the gift and to reconsider his plan for vengeance, reminding him that by sparing lives that day, he would be building a future without the burden of unnecessary bloodshed. Her words were not merely an appeal to emotion, but a logical and strategic argument, showing David the consequences of his actions and the more honorable path to follow. She planted in his mind the idea that true greatness lay not in impulsive revenge, but in controlled mercy, in the ability to exercise power with wisdom and discernment. The humility of her posture, the sincerity of her words, and the generosity of her offering began to take effect, piercing the armor of David's anger, and awakening in his heart consideration and reason. Abigail's words, spoken with such wisdom and humility, penetrated deeply into David's heart. The fury that consumed him began to dissipate, replaced by a growing admiration for the sensibility of this woman. He recognized the truth in her arguments, the wisdom in her counsel, and the generosity in her demeanor. The prospect of shedding innocent blood, driven by momentary anger, began to weigh on his conscience. The memory of his future as the Anointed One and the divine purpose for his life confronted him with the potential stain that hasty revenge could bring. In that crucial instant, in the middle of that dusty road, a woman's wisdom prevailed over a warrior's wrath, diverting the course of a conflict that could have had tragic consequences for many lives. Abigail's humility disarmed David's fury, and her intelligence showed him a more just and thoughtful path. Finally, David responded to Abigail, and his words were no longer filled with fury, but with acknowledgement and respect. He praised her wisdom, thanking her for preventing him from shedding blood and avenging himself with his own hands. He recognized the divine providence in their meeting and admitted that his anger had blinded him to the consequences of his actions. David accepted the generous gift Abigail offered him and blessed her, sending her back to her home in peace with the assurance that he would not harm Nabal. That moment sealed not only peace between David and Nabal's household, but also revealed the profound influence that a woman's wisdom and humility could have on a man of power and war. Abigail's intervention not only averted a tragedy, but also demonstrated the strength of reason and diplomacy in times of conflict. Abigail returned to her house and found Nabal in the midst of a great feast, drunk and unaware of the danger his foolishness had provoked. She waited until the next morning, when her husband's drunkenness had passed, to tell him everything that had happened, David's wrath, and how she had managed to prevent the destruction of their entire household. Upon hearing the shocking account, Nabal's heart failed within him, and he became like a stone. About 10 days later, the Lord struck him, and he died. The news of Nabal's death reached David, who recognized divine justice in what had occurred. Impressed by Abigail's wisdom and beauty, and recognizing the blessing she had been in his life, David sent messengers to ask for her hand in marriage. Upon receiving David's marriage proposal, Abigail once again demonstrated her humility and wisdom. She did not boast of her beauty or her intelligence, nor did she appear hasty to accept the honor of becoming the wife of such a powerful and respected man. Instead, she prostrated herself before David's messengers and declared herself a servant, willing to wash the feet of her Lord's servants. Her response was not merely a formality, but reflected genuine modesty and a recognition of David's greatness and the calling he carried. Abigail understood the significance of that moment and the potential of her union with the future king of Israel. Her acceptance was not driven by personal ambition, but by a discernment of divine purpose and the possibility of contributing to the future of her people alongside a just and anointed leader. Without delay, Abigail prepared to follow David's messengers. She mounted a donkey and, accompanied by 5 of her maids, set out to meet the future king. Her decision to leave behind the home she had shared with the foolish Nabal and unite her life with that of a man of faith and courage was a testament to her discernment and her pursuit of a different future. The journey was both physical and symbolic, representing her transition from a life marked by imprudence to a union with a man after God's own heart. As she approached David and his men, Abigail was not just a woman on her way to a marriage, but a figure of wisdom and integrity, whose past of trial had prepared her for a future of influence and significance alongside the King of Israel. Abigail's meeting with David was marked by mutual respect and a recognition of the divine providence that had brought them together. David, already aware of Abigail's wisdom and integrity through the report of his messengers, and undoubtedly remembering her crucial intervention that had prevented him from making a grave mistake, received her with honor. Their union was not just a political marriage or a strategic alliance, but an acknowledgement of admirable qualities in both individuals. Abigail, with her sensibility and humility, and David, with his faith and leadership, found in each other a complement and support for the challenges they would still face. The beginning of their life together foreshadowed a partnership marked by wisdom, courage, and a shared purpose under the Lord's blessing. Abigail's entry into David's life marked an important transition period for the future king of Israel. She brought with her not only beauty and intelligence, but also a wise and thoughtful perspective amidst the challenges and conflicts he faced. In a time of persecution by Saul and the leadership of a group of often impetuous men, Abigail's presence offered a counterpoint of calm and discernment. Her ability to assess situations with clarity and offer prudent advice became a valuable resource for David, helping him navigate the political and personal complexities of his journey to the throne. Their union was not just an affectionate bond, but an intellectual and spiritual partnership that strengthened both individually and as potential leaders of Israel. Throughout the years they were together before David ascended the throne, Abigail proved to be a loyal wife and a wise counselor. Her influence on David was subtle but profound, helping to shape his character and temper his impulsiveness. In times of crisis or important decisions, David often sought Abigail's discernment, trusting her ability to see beyond appearances and offer a balanced perspective. Their story became a testament to the power of a partnership where wisdom and courage complement each other, where a leader's strength is enriched by the intelligence and sensitivity of his companion. Abigail's presence was not merely ornamental, but fundamental to David's development as the great king he would become. Abigail's story resonates through the ages, not just as a tale of beauty and intelligence, but as a powerful example of how wisdom, humility, and courage can influence the course of events and touch the hearts of powerful leaders. Her decisive action prevented a massacre, demonstrated the strength of reason over fury, and contributed to the shaping of the character of one of Israel's greatest kings. Abigail's legacy is that of a woman who, at a crucial moment, chose peace over violence, wisdom over impulsiveness, and humility over arrogance, leaving an indelible mark on biblical history as a model of discernment and female influence. We can imagine the dynamics of Abigail's relationship with David's other companions. Men hardened by war and nomadic life, accustomed to David's strong and sometimes impetuous leadership, must have observed the arrival of this wise and elegant woman with curiosity and perhaps skepticism. However, as they witnessed the calming and thoughtful influence Abigail exerted on their leader, and as they perceived the respect David showed for her opinions, it is likely they developed a growing admiration for her. Abigail, with her genuine humility, certainly did not place herself above them, but interacted with wisdom and respect, gradually earning the trust of those who surrounded the future king. This interpersonal dynamic can enrich the narrative and show how Abigail's wisdom impacted not only David, but also his inner circle. Abigail's story also offers us insight into the customs and values of society at that time. The importance of hospitality, the gravity of Nabal's breaking of this tradition, and the expectation of recompense for favors rendered are central elements to understanding the initial conflict. Abigail's action in preparing a generous offering reflects a deep understanding of these social norms and an attempt to repair her husband's offense within this cultural context. By exploring these aspects, we can offer the viewer a more complete immersion into the biblical world and a greater appreciation for Abigail's intelligence in navigating these social complexities. When considering the absence of children mentioned in Abigail's relationship with Nabal and her subsequent marriage to David, who had multiple children, we can speculate on the possible implications of this change in her life. Perhaps Abigail longed for a family, or saw in David the possibility of a more promising and fruitful future. Although the scriptures do not detail her intimate feelings on this matter, this absence and subsequent fertility can add a layer of emotional depth to her journey, suggesting a search for a home and a lineage. This perspective can enrich the portrayal of Abigail, making her not just a figure of political wisdom, but also a woman with personal desires and hopes. Upon becoming one of David's wives, Abigail did not disappear into the shadows of the court. Her wisdom and discernment continued to be evident in her interactions with the king and her participation in court life. Although the scriptures do not detail every instance of her counsel, it is reasonable to assume that her ability to assess situations with clarity and offer thoughtful perspectives continued to be a valuable resource for David, especially during the turbulent years of his reign. The presence of such a wise and insightful woman alongside the king certainly contributed to the stability and justice of his rule, offering an essential feminine counterpoint in a male-dominated world. We can reflect on the impact of Abigail's story in relation to leadership. She did not wield power through force or formal authority, but through wisdom, humility, and the courage to speak truth to power. Her intervention with David was not an attempt to usurp his authority, but an act of service, seeking the greater good and preventing a mistake he would regret. Abigail's story teaches us that true leadership often involves the ability to listen to wise counsel, regardless of its origin, and that influence can be exerted in subtle but profoundly effective ways through integrity and discernment. Abigail's narrative also highlights the importance of effective communication in conflict resolution. Instead of confronting Nabal in his drunkenness or instigating a dispute, Abigail chose the right moment and strategic approach to intervene. With David, her ability to express her arguments clearly, persuasively, and with humility was crucial in changing the course of events. Her story reminds us that how we communicate can be as important as the content of the message, especially in high-tension situations where emotions can easily cloud reason. We can also consider Abigail's unusual courage in indirectly challenging her husband's actions and taking an independent initiative that could have had dangerous consequences for her. In a society where women had more restricted roles, her decision to act on her own without Nabal's knowledge demonstrates remarkable inner strength and a deep conviction that her actions were necessary to prevent a tragedy. This boldness, combined with her wisdom and humility, makes her an even more inspiring figure, showing that true strength often resides in those who dare to break with expectations and act according to their conscience. The speed with which Abigail acted, preparing the offering and going to meet David before the violence was carried out, underscores her intelligence and her ability to assess the urgency of the situation. She did not hesitate or waste time in lamentations. Instead, she mobilized her resources and her influence to intervene effectively. This readiness for action, combined with her strategic planning, demonstrates an agile mind and a natural leadership. Even if not formally recognized, Abigail did not wait for others to solve the problem. She took responsibility and acted decisively, saving her household and potentially preventing a larger conflict. As we reflect on Abigail's story, we can find parallels with contemporary situations where the wisdom, humility, and courage of individuals can have a significant impact in times of tension and conflict. Her ability to engage in dialogue with power, to present rational arguments, and to appeal to the humanity of the other side offers a timeless model for dispute resolution. Abigail's story encourages us to seek peaceful solutions, to use intelligence and empathy as tools for negotiation, and to recognize the transformative power of a wise and timely intervention, even in the face of anger and the threat of violence. Abigail's story is a testament to the power of emotional intelligence and the ability to read situations and people with insight. She knew how to assess David's fury, Nabal's foolishness, and the urgency of the moment, adapting her approach effectively to achieve her goal. Her humility was not a sign of weakness, but a demonstration of strategic wisdom, allowing her words to be received with greater attention and consideration. This combination of sharp intelligence and genuine humility made her a powerful force in a world where brute strength often prevailed. Unlike many biblical accounts focused on male figures of power and military leadership, Abigail's story highlights the significant impact a woman can have through her wisdom and courage. She did not wield a sword or lead an army, but her strategic intervention and eloquent words altered the course of history, saving lives and influencing the future king of Israel. Her example continues to inspire, showing that leadership and influence can manifest in various forms and that the voice of wisdom, even coming from an unexpected source, can be more powerful than brute force. Ultimately, Abigail's story is a celebration of the human capacity to choose reason over anger, peace over violence, and wisdom over foolishness. Her journey, from a marriage to a senseless man to becoming an influential counselor and wife of a great king, demonstrates remarkable resilience and an unwavering faith in her ability to do what is right. Her legacy endures as a beacon of hope, reminding us that even in dark and challenging times, the intelligence, humility, and courage of one individual can make the difference between destruction and salvation. We can imagine the impact of Abigail's presence in David's court, a complex environment with multiple wives and power dynamics. Her wisdom and integrity must have distinguished her, earning the respect not only of the king, but also of the other members of royalty and the counselors. Her ability to navigate these turbulent waters with grace and discernment is further testament to her intelligence and her peaceful nature, always seeking concord and justice amidst the intrigues of the court. Her quiet influence may have been a stabilizing factor during David's reign, offering a valuable feminine perspective in a predominantly male world. Abigail's story also invites us to reflect on the nature of true strength. Nabal possessed wealth and material power, but his foolishness led to his ruin. David was a mighty warrior, but he recognized Abigail's wisdom as a greater force. Abigail's true strength lay in her intelligence, in her ability to communicate effectively, in her humility that disarms anger, and in her courage to act according to her conscience. Her story teaches us that strength does not always manifest physically or authoritatively, but can be found in inner wisdom and the ability to influence others through reason and integrity. As we conclude our exploration of Abigail's story, we remember her legacy as a woman of remarkable discernment and courage, whose crucial intervention not only saved her household, but also influenced the course of the life of one of Israel's greatest leaders. Her story is a timeless reminder that feminine wisdom is a powerful force, capable of shaping events and inspiring generations. May Abigail's story continue to resonate as an example of how intelligence, humility, and decisive action can triumph over foolishness and violence, leaving an indelible mark on the history of faith and leadership. Amen. May the wisdom and peace that emanate from the story of Abigail, a woman of faith, courage, and discernment, also reach the hearts of everyone who has watched this narrative. May we learn from her example to seek peace amidst conflict, to use intelligence with humility, and to act with courage in the face of adversity. If this story touched your heart and you wish to continue exploring other inspiring biblical narratives, we ask that you subscribe to our channel Activate notifications so you don't miss the next videos. Leave your like to support us. Comment your thoughts and share this message with others. God bless you abundantly.